Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar. My name is Andrew Townsend. I'm with eLearning Brothers, and today we're going to be talking about the future of e-learning, the death of the LMS, and eLearning's next generation of tools. We have our very own Bill West, Executive Director of Custom Services here at eLearning Brothers, and Mike Hruska, the founder of Problem Solutions, with us today. So we're very excited to get started here. If you have any questions during the webinar, we'll be ready to answer your questions, so feel free to use the questions panel as you need it. So without further ado, Bill, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, again, I'm Bill West. I have the pleasure of leading the custom group at eLearning Brothers, and also hosting today Mike Hruska from Problem Solutions, maybe the smartest guy on the planet, to talk a little bit about the xAPI, LMSs, LRSs, and a number of other things of interest to you that are evolving your ecosystem. So Mike, if you would like to, I'll go ahead and let you start.
It sounds great. Thanks, Bill, and thanks, Andrew. We love this space in learning. Problem Solutions is a strategy, technology, and product mercenary firm. We like to solve the really difficult challenges. We've been dreaming about this learning ecosystem space for a long time. We had a dream. We believe that if we could make data available about people's experiences, both in learning and performance, and we could connect that, we could unlock a huge amount of value for organizations and competitive advantage. Over the last 8 years, we've been building the Experience API with the ADL program. We went to them a ways ago with a big idea and been very fortunate to have alignment and continue to get funding from them to develop the work in this space. We built full award-winning products. We have a ton of articles out there about learning ecosystems. Some of our founders have been co-authors of different books and things to help move the education and learning technology field forward. And absolutely excited to be here today to share with you some of the things that we've been thinking about for a while, and now that the Experience API standard is out there and now being required by Department of Defense instruction for procurement, some of the things that are going to shape in the market, but most importantly, how you can think about your learning ecosystems. Bill, do you want to talk a little bit more about you guys?
Yeah, outstanding. Thanks, Mike. This gets me really excited. You know, we could have brought some people on here to talk about xAPI. A lot of us know these things, but to be next to the people who actually fundamentally invented it is pretty exciting. 10-second summary here. A lot of you guys know who eLearning Brothers are already. Our core is to empower the instructional designers, make them better, make them rock stars by giving you, over 1 million assets. And at the top, one of my key roles is to put together a collective band of thought leaders like Mike in the industry and be able to offer that back to the industry through these webinars and through personal presentations and such. And what we're going to talk about today is really in the middle when you're trying to figure out your strategy for the infrastructure and how you're going to be able to elevate your entire organization. And this new thing about the xAPI and the legacy of the LMS are critical questions for us to try to answer as part of that. Let's start by getting to know the audience a little bit. This will be really helpful. I want to make sure Mike and I are talking at the right level and answering questions that you have. So Andrew, we're going to go through a couple questions here, learn a little bit more about our audience.
All right, I'll go ahead and launch the first poll.
So we want to know, what percentage of your training is done online, via e-learning or web-based? This really helps. We know a lot of people are still using instructional or classroom training, instructor-led training, and nothing wrong with that. We certainly know. But this really helps us gauge answers coming in. And wow, if I'm reading this right, we're seeing some really interesting numbers, almost an even distribution of the usage of e-learning. Give you a couple more minutes. We got 81% of people voted. Let's let it get a little bit higher, and then Andrew, maybe you could show the results.
All right, 5 more seconds.
Wow, that's perfect. I think you timed it just right. Let's see what we have here. Look at that. I don't think we could have guessed that it would have been an even distribution of the people that have less than 25%, 26 to 50, 50 to 75, and 100, almost evenly distributed. That's quite interesting, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I find fascinating, and I guess would be my question. I know we don't have a poll for it, but I'd be really interested, to think about the folks that are 76 to 100%. Are you getting the translation and transfer into performance? And the folks that are 0 to 25%, have you always been there? What have you learned? And this formal and informal learning is absolutely important. We're going to talk more about that in a bit.
Outstanding. Yeah, let's make sure that we definitely hit on those angles. So those of you that are using e-learning, so 75% or more, we get a little bit more about how it's delivered. Your infrastructure. Is most of your delivery via an LMS? Are you using your internal intranet or internal web pages to deliver the training, or are you getting to it from outside? Maybe using outside resources such as Pluralsight or Lynda, and are you at the point of using a learning record store? And we're going to talk about what that is in a bit here too. So let's see, we got half of the people coming in right now, and folks are coming in really fast this time. That's great. Give you a few more seconds to get a statistically reliable number of voters. And I think we're in pretty good shape, Andrew. If you want to go ahead and share the results, I don't see much of a change in percentages coming in at this point.
Okay, 5 seconds.
Okay, not entirely unexpected, but actually a little bit of excitement, I got to say, Mike. 0% using an LRS. So we're going to be able to talk about something new to a lot of people here for the first time, and that's actually kind of exciting from a webinar standpoint. All right, another question. We're going to talk about xAPI. I know this is new. Let's go ahead and put the poll up there and find out the level of knowledge of our audience. Definitely want to make sure as we're presenting content for you guys today that we are definitely presenting at the right level. We're not going to geek out too early if the audience isn't ready for this. And the early returns, looks like we're in a really good spot here, Mike, with the largest group really getting to the point where they're just starting to be interested and researching it. Is that consistent with what you're seeing in the industry, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. There are definitely some early adopters. I see some movement in the government and some large organizations that see value in using data to improve human capital and efficiency. But I also see some skunk work, small projects at mid-sized companies where people are saying, I believe there's a future here and it could be cool, and I'm going to be the person to implement this inside my company and kind of prove it out.
That's excellent, and we're going to talk about how to pilot some of this. So our audience is right where we want it to be in terms of people who are just now getting interested, and we're going to put this in personal terms. We could go crazy with the tech speak with xAPI because clearly, just by nature, it looks like it's a technical thing. But we are going to talk to real live usage and things that make a difference with instructional designers. I think we can pretty much infer from this one. Let's do a quick check on this one about people's plans to use xAPI. So we just learned that some people just started to research it. Other people are just now getting exposed to it. Andrew, let's find out what the plans are for next year. Which one of these groups, people in this groups are definitely have plans, are considering having plans, or it's just still exploratory in your organization. Outstanding. Andrew, you can close that when you're ready. I'm watching the polls come in, and I think the answer's what we think the answer's going to be, and that is everyone's just now exploring. This is great. So I congratulate everybody for getting in here early. I am really hopeful with myself and Mike that we can give you guys a really good feel for what this really is, so you can carry the conversation forward to other people And as you were looking at your infrastructure, you can decide, is this really something that could make a difference? So last poll question, let's get a sense of who we're talking to. Instructional designers and developers, people that are leading L&D, our IT guys out there, there's the ones that are, they have to take care of the LMS and the other tools that we use, and then executive level. Mike, you think the interest in this topic will vary widely from the level of the organization a person sits in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that at a certain level, we just want to solve problems for our end users. We want to give them the right content that's available to them. Someone else, their use cases might be, I want to see what learning is impacting performance. At another level, you may want to understand what the human capital potential is. What are the capabilities we have in our organization, and what are the capabilities that we need, and use that for planning and to understand how to make smart investments.
Excellent, good. And I think at the end of the day, we're all wondering, is this something that could really help me, and how do I tell whether the training we're delivering is actually making a difference downstream? Are we seeing the performance changes? And if we have really high expectations for performance changes, what can we do about it? And we'll throw a little bit of millennial speak in there too, because these guys are helping drive it. So Mike, I'll turn it over to you, and we're going to have a great analogy right now. I think you guys are going to be able to personalize this. Go ahead.
So in 1993, GPS went operational, and the world has changed radically since. I can remember in 2000 when I was working in the government space, having to print out MapQuest directions to help me figure out what next step I would get. And if I would drop the pages and they would go out of order, I'd be in big trouble. But GPS has radically changed the world. At the core, we're using sensors to collect data, human context data, big data, and then we're using that to help us better navigate the world. The other design pattern there is that we could use that data to help the world better navigate around us. We have some emerging business models, though, that in 1993, I don't think anyone was thinking were possible. Things like Waze and Uber, and I can't imagine a world without Uber. I live in a small town. They finally got Uber, and there you could hear the applause from the mountaintops here. But what do these things really do? They collect contextual data. They use sensors to understand our position, and then they use maps to really assist us in getting us from point A to point B or through a series of destinations. Why can't learning be like this? This idea is nothing new, but doing it is really tough. What do people really want? Well, they want to be self-guided, self-starting, and they want a personalized experience that's just for them. They want the scenic way, they want the way with no holes, they want the highway, they want the least amount of turns, which you can't currently do, which I'm trying to figure out. And they don't want anything they don't need. If your GPS gave you data that you were uninterested in, you would stop using it and you would do something else. The most important thing is you want signal, and that signal in this case is really knowledge, super important. So what do you really want? Well, I talked a little bit about some of the use cases about, hey, I just want to serve my learners. I want them to spend their seat time, whether it's in courseware or in the classroom, or them having the right performance support things at the right time, but they need the right thing at the right time. And if you ask them, they would say, we want what we want when we want it. Most importantly, our job isn't necessarily just for learning, it's to develop people that are in performance and are delivering value to the organization. We have a ton of data that we could capture about user feedback. So if someone was using a performance support system, we could use that data to do machine learning and make better recommendations of how to use it. Also, understanding investments. What content are people using? What impact is that having in our organization? And should we be prioritizing our investments in learning in other places? And then I think some of the holy grail here is the idea behind Experience API is to blur the space between learning and performance. And if we can blur this space, now we can start to connect these things into KPIs in our organization.
Yeah, and I want to add, I think that one of the exciting things about this is with the millennials, and not just them as a demographic, but the technology that they brought along, how it evolved as they got older, and the way we learn just in a natural course of living. You know, we mentioned with some of the examples earlier, you know, when we need content right now, we pick up a phone and we go straight to it. We go to Yahoo and we type in a question, or Yahoo, aging myself, sorry about that. We're going to Google or YouTube and type in something and we get the instant response. That's what people expect now. And that's where we have to move learning organizations to be able to provide that same thing. And that's difficult. It's hard to talk about and hard to visualize, and we're going to try to do that where we can create an environment within the corporate walls where people can get to the content they need just when they need it, that we can ensure high-performing employees, people in the normal course of life, they want to be high-performing. I want to get from point A to point B. I want to find the best restaurant. And user content curation. You look at some of the reviews within Yelp. You look at so much of the content that's being generated and consumed in the current world, and it's being generated and consumed by other people, not by central agencies. And we're going to see that in the learning field where more and more of your content that is useful to your employees is being generated by the employees themselves as opposed to learning organization. And it's going to be the learning organization's job to create an environment that facilitates that. And then what we really want out of it is then to be able to measure whether this is useful whatsoever and we're hitting our xAPIs or our KPIs. What I love about this, and as we brainstorm more and more about how this could be used, is there is a possibility for us finally to start moving across the chasm of Bloom's taxonomy. You know, it hasn't been too hard for us to get to the knowledge point. We do surveys to see how far we can get into comprehension, but then we kind of lose track. There's never been a really good way to tie back what's happening out on the job, whether they've achieved that level of performance, and be able to tie that back to anything that we actually did in our interventions within training. And xAPI is going to close that loop in a very, very exciting way. Sticking with this metaphor, this is what we're looking for. It's what your employees are looking for. It's relatively the same for all, except we all start at a different viewpoint based on our past experiences. So what we want is learning paths laid out in lots of different types of assets where I can choose what I need when I need it. It's adaptable based on what I'm bringing to the game. So if it's A through Z and I'm already at K, I don't have to go back to A. I can just start at K and move forward. And if we're doing our jobs in a learning organization, we're tying all these assets back to a set of competencies. We know what it takes to do the job. We know what the role is, what the skills ought to be. We ought to be able to pull all this together and then be able to tie all those assets back and monitor who's using what, how they're using it, and how it works. And so it's all based on a predefined goal. We're all trying to get to the top of the mountain, but based on individual experience and where the holes are, we all may take a different route. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, look, nobody wants to fall into the abyss. Every single person that enters your organizations wants to get over that chasm, and they want to climb to the top of the mountain, whether it's within the career that you've hired them for, or the job, or to scaffold their experiences and move up in the organization. If given the right opportunities and the right level of engagement, people don't want to fall, they want to climb, and this will afford them the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, we've got a really great question related to that from Kim out there. Thanks for your question. And she asks, how much of the learning needs to be within the institution and how much happens on a larger scale? For example, I'm not going to my institution ask for a question on Microsoft Word. I'm going to go out to the MS Word community. And that's an absolutely perfect question because we're in a state right now where the institution, meaning our learning and development groups, we can't control the content. We can't control the knowledge. We couldn't possibly assemble enough of it to respond to the types of things that Kim's talking about. And so we go out to the Apple support site or the Word support site or anything else, and we look for someone else who asks the same question, and we get that answer. And we're going to be talking about tools that are available now that can be implemented in your infrastructure that allow you to do that exact same type of thing, that allow groups with common interests to create their own societies with their own questions and answers and allow other employees to tap into that and get exactly what they need. So the shift is definitely happening. There's been a lot of really great stuff written about it, that the L&D group is becoming more of a facilitator of infrastructure and capability and less of the knowledge broker as we used to be. The Triple Crown, so there's the things that we all like to talk about. The adaptive learning, experiential learning, 7-20-10, these are rules that, I mean, we've been hearing this, we've been talking about these things, it's kind of, ethereal. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down and talk about how this can actually happen and how it's not that big of a chasm for you to cross to be able to start putting things in place that are actually truly adaptive and can collect experiences and bring them back into your world. And I say formalize the informal is the way I like to put it, because for years the 10% was formalized, the rest of it was just kind of out there and we kind of hoped it happened. And now we can put more structures in place to make sure that that 70% not only does happen, but it's facilitated, it's tracked, we can tie it back. So let's talk a little bit about these techniques that you've heard about and that we've talked about, and which ones are most critical right now in your thoughts to the success of your organization. Good results. Excellent. I'm going to find myself slightly crippled that I put 2 or more of the above but didn't identify which 2 they are. But I think we're going to be able to decipher the data just fine, Mike. Good. In your view, Mike, when you take a look at the 3 of these, which of the 3 do you think has been the hardest to adopt, and which one's the most challenging for organizations to get their hands around?
So I think there's a little challenge in each one, a little dragon to be slayed. Adaptive learning, you can think about that in 2 ways. Big level adaptive path stuff. So based upon how I did it in this experience, what experience might I get next? There's a really lower level version of that that turns into what people call intelligent tutoring, which is really hard and very expensive and used in domains that are extremely difficult to learn and where the cost of failure is a life. Experiential learning is great. I think it's awesome and a lot of people are doing it, but it's hard to track the data from it. And so how do you get the data is the dragon there. And 70-20-10's amazing, and it's a good meme in the industry, and from the data that I'm seeing, it seems like people are using it and people are doing it, but there's not a 70-20-10 solution that you can just grab off the shelf and say, now we're doing it. We clicked the box, we installed this, or we deployed this system, and now we're doing 70-20-10 great. So I think there are challenges in each one of them.
Yeah, outstanding. So good results. As I mentioned, crippled myself just a bit with the 2 or more, but I think we could probably infer 22% from experiential learning is going to be most critical, really tapping into that 70%, and a pretty equal distribution across them. So second question, I think this may be the last of our polls, and then we're going to get into some real examples of how this is working. And one of the things I'm going to answer a question from Scott while you guys are voting here, and he asks, in all of this information that's out there in the cloud, how can we vet what's true or correct if it's coming from a learner and not a knowledge leader? And I think what you see here is a lot like what you'll see on Yelp or Apple Support and the others, and that is that the audience regulates itself. That the best of the content is rated highest and it's going to show up as highest. The content that's incorrect is going to have responses that note the fact that it's incorrect or indicate where it needs to be changed. And is that your opinion as well, Mike, that the group governs itself in this way?
Yeah, the inmates run the asylum, I think, in a lot of ways. I think this is probably different for different organizations based upon structure and tenure, but the gap here is getting people ready and checking the box that they've taken all of the learning, and then linking that up to organizational outcomes. And I think that's one of the hard things that we're all facing, but the whole idea behind the design of xAPI is to enable adaptive learning and 70-20-10 and provide a meaningful way to capture experiential learning. And if we do it the right way, and if we encode the data in a rich enough context, then we start to solve some of these gaps.
Outstanding. Andrew, if you could show the results. What I like about the way we're looking at this is, I believe in this presentation we're going to help you set priorities for how to approach crossing this chasm, one step at a time. Our first challenge is the fact that the learning technologies are changing. So we have these things we're going to refer to in LRS and xAPI and such. It is coming at us fast. We look at the social learning media that's ahead, that's there in front of us, and platform technologies. It is coming to us fast, and it's hard to decipher just how important each one is. At the same time, I was at the CLO Learning Exchange just last week, and we kept hearing over and over again just how quickly businesses were changing, even the ones that we thought were very well established. Constant changes from different pressures. So, for example, what we have to do is we have to justify why the learning technology is important. We have to tie that to the change of business so that we can then get the funding that we want. And once we understand the technology and how it can be applied, once we're able to tie it to those changes in the business, now you can go to the CFO, CEO, whoever you need to go to, and rationalize where the funding has to come from. And then trailing there towards the end is we've got to find good people who can do it. And they're, and that's tough because this is all very new. So trying to find those right vendors with the right skills to help you get through this is actually something we're going to talk about at the very end of the presentation as well. We had a really good question from somebody. I just want to really quickly tell you, just going to talk about how we measure across the LMS and LRS, and we will get to that. So let's see where we are. The learning ecosystem, this is something that I crowdsourced not long ago. I went out to some of my colleagues. I've been in the industry for 30 years now. I've got a chance to meet a lot of really, really smart people. And I wanted to see if there was a way to show how everything interrelated. The technologies that we're faced with, the things we're trying to achieve. If you look at the far right, we're trying to put together strategies that tie into real skills that people have to execute to do their job, and we want to be able to measure that. One of the hardest things we've ever dealt with. And the technologies, and the center point there is content. What are the different ways that we can deliver content, and then what spokes off of that? So we put together this model. Mike, you were very influential in helping me trying to get this right, and we went crowdsourcing even farther last week, sharing it with about 20 chief learning officers to get more insight into how it might work. And one of my objectives with it, there's just two objectives. One is to say, when we started this whole e-learning thing, probably around 1999 or so, we had content, we had the capability to now deliver that content via the web, and we had these things on the back end called learning management systems that could help govern what we were doing. And we didn't have much more than that. We had our traditional classrooms and such. But now when we take a look at e-learning, the ecosystem is so much more expansive because there's so many new things that we can do now, new technologies. And I've started adding some of the personal stuff as well, classroom-based, because the blended solutions often do include a really awesome classroom-based component. And Mike, I'm going to switch. We're going to see how the xAPI and the things that we're talking about here, bridging this gap between learning and actual performance, lights up on this ecosystem. What are your thoughts about this, Mike?
I think that there are some of these that most of you are using, and there are many of these that all are considering using or might have some kind of impact. At the end of the day, each of these things are both a producer and a potential consumer of data. Your learning ecosystem could leverage, your LMS and mobile learning and mobile apps to pull data and wearables and other things into a learning record store. But that data then could be used by an adaptive engine or a career mapping tool to help you better understand what your future looks like or present you with the right kind of experience or a tailored experience in some ways. That data could also be used to tailor what kind of job aids or performance support items that you're getting. That data could also be used within a business simulation to say, well, Bill already has the conflict resolution competency and he has the team cohesion competency. So let's try to make his proficiency in these higher while he's within this. So I think that the value starts to get unlocked here when things become producers and consumers of xAPI data.
Outstanding. Let's start getting into the real nitty-gritty. So in simple terms, people talk about the LMS and LRS. In simple terms, it plays out like this, and we're going to start diving deep into this and show some real examples. But you've got a person, you've got lots of content, lots of assets. The LRS and the LMS, they do live together. The LMS has got to grow up to keep up with the LRS. But I kind of compare this, Mike, to having an oven or a microwave. You know, you don't want to choose one over the other. You really kind of want both, don't you?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And if you look at the functions that an LMS performs, they generally have users, they generally have courses available, and they keep track of the courses that you had. They do other things too. I mean, there are approximately 600 to 700 LMSs that are out there. But the one thing an LRS does, that an LMS does at the middle of that Venn diagram, is to track what people do. And that's not just within the LMS, that's in all these other delivery modalities that your organization might leverage.
Outstanding. So what is that data that might collect? And we're talking about data that happens everywhere. Every resource you can think of outside of the training, from what a manager may provide to an employee, to a PDF, a video that they watch, all of those things. Let's talk about real examples. This is what we're looking for, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, our users want to access it from anything. That could be the mobile device, which you all have your phone with you, because if you didn't, you would be home getting it, or you wouldn't know where you were supposed to be. And this includes web. But in the future, we're going to continue to have more modalities for getting data, whether it's from our experiences, whether it's from our TV or other things. Yes, we learn from LMSs, but we also learn from people within our organization, and that's tutors and peers and mentors and a variety of other social networks. Future, we're going to be getting better recommendations. I would love to show up every day with something that said, based upon what you did yesterday and what you have to do today, here's 5 minutes of information or an experience that's going to inspire you, keep you engaged, or remove my boredom. At the end of the day, we just need just in time and just for me. The ADL, Advanced Distributed Learning mantra, has been anywhere, anytime learning, and with the proliferation of IoT and pervasive computing, there's a ton of stuff. There's a lot of noise, so we need to get to the signal in a lot of ways.
All right, so when it gets down to this, we're going to show you some examples. What does this really mean? What does this really mean, Mike? We want to get a person who's capable of doing X. What do we have to do to get them to be able to do X? Who are these people that already do X, and what makes them so awesome? And how do we share that? Let's look at a real example here of just-in-time performance. Mike, you want to lead us through this slide?
Yeah, sure. The mobile device gives us the ability to get all kinds of push, and we already get it in the form of advertising or notifications about someone's dog or birthday cake on Facebook. But we could be getting so much other key information about our job or role within the organization. And then we have those near-peer opportunities in the organization. If we could get data about who's solving what problems, we could better aggregate the expertise within our organizations. In the customer service world, we have a ton of information, and we have people that call in with problems or needs. If we could better understand how to help our folks on the end of the phone have less downtime or have more meaningful information or be more helpful, then there's real end customer impact that's there. And don't forget about the best assessment tool that you have, your own people. And so observational assessment and looking at measures and assessments of competency and proficiency in a variety of work environments has a huge ability to add value to this data ecosystem.
All right, let's get into some of the real data. Why don't you give us an example of how this might pull together, Mike, and an example of how an LRS is used to help ensure performance.
Yeah, so I'm sure that many of you fly airplanes, maybe not in the pilot seat, but hopefully in the back, and I hope they let you stay on the plane in the future. So this example is using a simulator, and we're getting data about the control selection and what the pilots are doing, and we're getting information about the state of the plane. Is it taxiing? Is it climbing? Is it descending? Is it in normal flight? By understanding that, we only have one small picture of the data. By augmenting that with an observer or controller that's making assessments about the pilot's communication and performance and other things that systems just frankly aren't that good at without a lot of training and investment, we can unlock some really cool things. We can look at our high and low performers, and that might be anything from a hard landing to rapid descents. We can do some real-time remediation for low performance and provide feedback. We can also provide learning path guidance after the fact. So we can use the data within this experience to provide some micro-learning opportunities, whether it be video or other immersive experiences. And the other thing we get is a real understanding of the performance of a wide range of people in a very granular way. This gives us the ability to better choose scenarios. We could have more efficient use of the simulators by getting people to competency faster, or we could keep them in the same seat time and we could get them to a higher level of proficiency as well.
Okay, so we have, I'm gonna pass by this if you can bear with me. Let's talk about an experience. We don't have a whole lot of pilots on the session. Let's talk about how this might work in a store, a regular environment, Mike. Talk about how the LRS and how we can tie into actual ERP, actual systems that are used to do the job, and tie those two together with the LRS and xAPI.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could, in the previous example, you could swap out that plane for any type of formal learning experience or experiential stuff where you're getting a little bit of data and augmenting that with an observational assessment. So for example, in a store, a lot of different workers. They're using point of sale systems, they're using scanners, they're moving goods around. Inside of the store, if we had a better understanding of how they were using those scanners, how they were interacting with customers, and we could provide a means to assimilate some of these different data streams, we could understand who our best customer interaction people are. We can understand the people that move the logistics process forward within the stores. Most importantly, we could collect a lot of that data to help those that aren't doing so well be more like the rock stars that are really doing well. By integrating the IoT data, Internet of Things, with the learning data and with performance data from observational assessment or other system measures, we get a really clear picture of how the store is performing.
So we can see how an individual did throughout the competency map and completing their training, and compare that with their actual sales data. How are they performing on the job? We can help push if an individual is moving from lawn and garden and has to move over to sporting goods because somebody is absent that day. Now they have to be able to sell guns, and the rules are different. So we can push the information, even perhaps push out a certification exam very quickly so that they're qualified to do that particular job, and then we can monitor how they're doing on the job when they get there. Let me go ahead.
Yeah, so I think one of the important things here is context-sensitive content. So context-sensitive content understands where we are in our career progression, where we are in our day, and all the other contextual elements. It provides us that right nudge or cue or information that might be a job aid or performance support or a learning experience, or just a policy refresh, or maybe a question to help us frame what we're doing and get better transfer.
Yeah, so here's just some screenshots. Last week I was talking to one of the CLOs at the conference that oversees a retail organization. They're especially retail provider, and they're in high fashion, and the high fashion changes quickly. So they have a number of things. They've got culture. They've got a history of culture. They want to make sure all their sales associates are totally in tune with that culture. They have new product information coming out on a regular basis. They have to know the product information. They have to know the pitch on the product information. And they have basic selling skills on how to interact with the client and how to actually get them drawn in and to pay a premium price for these products. And of course, there's other things as well. So the idea of being able to have, adaptive learning, have the ability to get to the information quickly that they need, tie that in with the training, and at the same thing, tie it in with the POS and how they're performing. So there's this full link back from the learning group that's brokering the information to the people on the job to the back-end systems. And the xAPI and their LRS is what's holding all that together. And these are other examples you can see of how this kind of technology can be used to push information out just in time, to track where people are and what they're doing. You mentioned GPS, and we know this couple in the lower left. We know exactly what windmill they're at. We know what's wrong with that windmill. We can push the information they need. We can prioritize the jobs. Mike, if I recall, you did something recently, something to do with welding. Want to tell the story of how that worked?
Yeah, sure. So we tracked the learning experiences that folks had that were formal, and the knowledge checks and the abilities. We then put them into performance. We had the strength testing of the materials ultimately, so that's the qualification score in some ways. But we used an observer with a tablet that was also getting information about their technique and their posture, and also providing evidence so that data could be reviewed real time with them right after the experience to provide some level of remediation.
Outstanding. So let's get into some of the technical pieces. Quickly ahead. How do you move ahead? Take a look at the current ecosystem. I think we've got a baseline in terms of where people are. One of the things we'll talk about is find a pilot. Let's find an obvious quick win. Could be that retail organization. They were all over this as a possible solution. The one large energy company, the windmill example, was something they wanted to start with. But find something where this is an obvious solution and build that business case. We saw from our poll that that's what people need first. Understand what these systems are, build that business case so they can get the funding, and then get the tools. You don't have to necessarily go out and buy a big LMS or an LRS. There's cloud-based solutions out there that aren't highly expensive that will allow you to at least get that pilot out there, and you can actually prove to people that this is going to work and find a way to apply it to other ends of your organization. So I have a lot of questions on how you do this. People really want to know. So let's geek out. Mike, let's talk about how technically this works and how people would implement it. How do you track these things? Go ahead.
Yeah, so the real important thing is having a problem that you're trying to solve. In a little bit, we've got a tool that we're going to give you to help you articulate your problems. But once you find the problems and business outcomes that you're really seeking, your goal is to get at least 2 data sources connected in some ways. And this could be observational assessment. It could be data from your LMS. And then you need to provide some kind of visualization or analytics with it. So I have, a really simple example would be, I'm going to get data about completions and competencies that people fulfilled and put those in my LRS. And then I'm going to look at performance support or job aids, and I'm going to collect data from that. And then I'm going to look at who is accessing what and see if there's some kind of correlation between how they did in the learning and how much support they ultimately need on the job. Visualizing that is one thing, but using that to build insight is something that's really important. That insight from that could be used to build directed coaching and mentoring for those folks that maybe the people that aren't using it because they don't need it, but maybe they're not using it because they don't know how to use it, or maybe they're just not doing that well by not using it. And there are people that are using it, that the data that we're collecting about what they're accessing in the performance support and what they're doing and maybe their regular tool, having that connection and understanding would allow us to provide context-sensitive performance support. So as I'm working through any system, I can ultimately get the best right answers. And collecting user feedback about the performance support or job aids that they might be using is critical. Having two items is two different systems is really all you need pushing to an LRS for a pilot. Visualizing it is good because when you're trying to sell the validity of your project besides your business case, you're ultimately going to have to show some beautiful pictures about what's actually happening in the system, but then providing some kind of guidance for how you would use that visualization to produce an insight that would change how you would be impacting the users or changing how the environment is impacting the users.
Okay, and Mike, we've got a really relevant question here from Kim. There's clearly, and I almost say enough to say there's something missing from this diagram, and a piece that that we probably don't talk often enough about is on the how-to, is the portal, is the window into this, is the interface that allows us to get to these things, to add these things, to be able to see the analysis. There are some really good tools out there. I think of a tool such as PathGather. I think about Unbox Technology's Spoke tool. Having that right interface tool is what will allow people to search for the learning assets that's out there, to be able to rate those assets, to be able to contribute those assets. We're working with an organization now, just saw a case study, I think it was one of PathGather's case studies, and the amount of usage, the amount of content being contributed by that organization just absolutely blew everybody's expectations away. And really the key is having that right interface, having somebody who can design and implement a learning experience and a way to interact with these things and find these things, integrate social, even maybe some gamification, is so direly important to making all of this work. Let's talk about the activity streams, and I really like the way you pull this together. I think this helps people understand how we go about collecting the real-life experiences into the LRS. Mike?
Yeah, so at the somewhat more granular but non-technical level, xAPI is the way to describe a human experience and store that interoperably as data in a learning record store, which is a database for xAPI data. The Experience API is based on activity streams, which was something that was built by Microsoft and Yahoo and other social platforms that talk about people's interaction in worlds. But we built this to have the ability to be extended. So we have simple things like actor, verb, and object. So we can say, I read this book, I watched this movie, or I took this course and I attained the following competencies. And there were measures about my proficiency in a series of assessments, and these were the outcomes that were associated with it. So this context, results, and extensions space of Experience API is where we can encode additional data that's meaningful about the context that will provide a lot of the extended use cases for great visualization, analytics, analysis, and correlation and causality for learning and transfer to performance, and will enable some of the recommendation engine and adaptive learning stuff that we've been talking about.
There's a good question here from Nadine regarding the amount of data. She asks that how much data is enough to define the problems or provide the solutions? She says it seems really time-consuming.
Yeah, so this is a problem we've been working on for a couple years. Besides working with the folks at ADL, we've been working with the Army, and they've been funding us to research how to better use some of the context, results, and extensions space, and how to better structure that data. So we built some best practices in that area. This is something I can talk to Bill about getting out. And then we also have a tool that developers really like called Pipeline, which helps to implement these best practices in a little piece of code, so they can embed this small piece of code in a mobile performance support tool or a mobile app or a simulation or an LMS or even just your content management system, it abstracts the developer from having to learn everything about the xAPI spec, and it provides a little bit of structure and guidance on how to do some of the extended encoding that will ultimately produce this. I've had a number of people say, I'll just collect everything. We'll sort it out later. That's tough. So that we spent about the last 3 years working a number of different projects on this encoding and best practices and trying to build tools that would be examples or something that could help industry move a little farther, a little faster.
Some of this, when I look at this, and I think some of the audience might feel the same way, some of it feels theoretical. Do you have another example where something like this could be used in a practical sense?
Sure. This isn't necessarily a domain everyone will understand well, but I think you'll get the picture. The most important thing about it is the business outcome. So we took marksmanship training, something that's really difficult and takes a long time, and we collected xAPI data along a person's development, and then we used that to adapt their individual learning path. Then we took the data from the development of the individual, and we used that data to compose teams, because they put the marksman with a commander and a driver, and they put those into larger units. We use that data to not just make the team, but also to determine which scenarios that team would get. The folks who received the treatment of the adaptive condition and the team selection got to proficiency 40% faster than those that didn't. And we spent 60% less scenarios getting them there. So, imagine a scenario in your organization. Most of the time, people are on an individual learning path, and they're expected to perform as a group. You could collect the data individually and adapt and get them to task faster, but then they're more prepared, and the team has better experiences together to get the whole team to proficiency faster.
Outstanding, outstanding. We're running on time, so let's talk a little bit about the architecture here for maybe 90 seconds or so and get back into a practical example.
Sounds great. So along this multi-year journey with the Army, we wanted to prove out that we could both produce and consume data from a variety of systems. We were using some open source learning record store and the WAX LRS from Saltbox. We were taking data and importing data from existing systems because they weren't making xAPI. So we built a tool called the Soldier Performance Planner that pulled that data in. The other thing that it did was present a number of use cases for visualization and analytics of the data. So I could see a person and their competencies and deficiencies. I could see a group and their competencies and deficiencies. And I could also see a person and multiple assessments for a single skill, so I could see their performance change through time. Then we hooked up a bunch of different simulators that use the pipeline piece of code that I talked about that helps to get better data. And then we connected a bunch of other systems to do some proof of concepts around virtual worlds and augmented reality and simulators and games and mobile apps. Now we have all of this data and we can look at it, but how does it make an individual employee's life better? We use an intelligent tutor called GIFT, or the Generalized Intelligent Framework for Tutoring, and we let GIFT listen to the learning record store. And when I logged into the GIFT platform, GIFT would say, does Mike have any deficiencies? Oh, he's deficient at his whiteboarding skills. Well, let's look for content that's available for whiteboarding skills. So users that were logging into this reference architecture on a daily basis would be afforded opportunities to mitigate any of the deficiencies they had. Certainly, this was in the military domain because they do the advanced research on this, but I'm sure you could imagine any of these different modalities and the data that you might collect, and then having a recommendation engine, making your simple morning recommendation. Based upon what I did yesterday, this is what I need to do today.
That's excellent. There's a couple questions that are very similar here to Bala's, and I think this is a good time to ask it. He said, it seems the LRS is attempting to combine learning deployment, content evaluation methodologies, or at least the data needed to complete evaluations, in the same repository as the learning content. Is that correct?
Yeah, in order to blur this line that's typically a thick wall between learning and performance, we need to have the data in a similar format. And so xAPI provides that opportunity. The mixing of the data allows us an efficient place to pull the data from for analytics purposes.
Outstanding. It's a good question about whether this is all relevant to small organizations. And the retail example that I mentioned earlier definitely was a small organizations by contrast to to a GE or a Walmart with the retail stores. Their ability to encapsulate the culture of the organization, the product information people need, the skills that people need, tie it to the back-end systems, and have their very small learning organization be able to see that entire picture so that they can adjust any of those elements, whether it's how product information is delivered or the training that people take and those kinds of things, is really going to make the organization much more effective and efficient. And that's a fairly small organization that's finding a way to pull this together. We mentioned some LRSs, so just little resources here. There are open source LRSs out there. Learning Locker, certainly one that I know is extremely popular. As well as a couple commercial. This isn't a huge market yet. The LRS it's new, it's evolving quickly. Some really good products, Saltbox and Wax is a group we work with very many times. But I know this is a new evolving technology. Mike, if I had to go out and find and use an LRS for the first time, what would be your advice, the first step to take?
Well, open source isn't free. It's kind of like getting a car. You still have to care and feed for it and change the oil. But it certainly is something that you can start with no or low dollars. The visualization analytics tools that you have in the commercial packages are a bit more robust. And so if that's an important part of your component, you can get started with one of these also for low dollars, and their revenue models permit you, and their pricing permits you to scale up as you get greater need. I like all of them. I've used all of them for one project or another, and we built the one for ADL.
Oh, outstanding! Congratulations. Hey, and I know there's another organization you work with, Cognitive Advisors. There's a question here: if an employee reads a book on how to improve their performance, how do I record the specific book, assess the benefit of that resource, and is there a database with the content eval? How does the data actually get into the system, Mike?
Yeah, so Cognitive Advisors has a tool called Trek, which really does a good job of trying to implement the 70-20-10 rule. They build a framework of competencies and then map formal, informal, and experiential learning activities into those. So if this was a prescribed learning activity along their learning path, they would say, I completed the book, and depending upon the design of the experience, it would ask for reflection items. It might then flow to their coach or mentor, who might ask additional questions and get feedback. The other side of that is your IT guys could stand up something on your intranet site very quickly that said, what great book have you read this month? And you could be saying, Bill West read Learning Everywhere. And you could be collecting that data and curating that data. So there are a variety of ways to do it. There's simple and informal, and then there are more formal types of plans and tools that you might integrate that into.
Outstanding. I know we're coming to the top of the hour. Andrew's going to kick us off if I don't close. We are going to get back to every single one of you with a couple of resources, one of which is Problem Solutions Articulation Tool for questions about how do you define this problem, how do you break it down, and how do you get to a real good example where application possibilities are open. So we've got a really good tool. We'll send this URL out to you as well so you can get access to the tool. We'll also send you a link to the online book, The 7 Attributes. It's something I had the pleasure of authoring a while back. We did research in the industry about how to pick a vendor. So you've got this brand new technology. You've got some emerging challenging business issues. You can't make a mistake. There's not that many vendors out there. How do you pick the right one? So the 7 attributes is focused on how to write the RFP, how to assess the different vendors, how to make a successful relationship between the vendor. There's a 63% error rate out there in terms of vendor relationships, client relationships. The clients are replacing the vendors at least once every 3 years, 63% of the time. It's really horrendous, and so what we're hoping to do is to give some real thought here and give a blueprint to people so they can have successful relationships. It doesn't help our industry when the vendors are failing. So it was really important we put this work together for both the vendors and the clients. I'm Bill. That was Mike. This is our information. We love talking about this stuff, if you haven't noticed. And so if you've got specific questions, got a great question here from Susan about the real estate market, how real estate agents might use this. So if you've got questions about specifics, give us a call. Send me an email, send Mike an email, give us a call. If you've got groups and you want the same webinar to be presented to a smaller group where we can personalize a little bit more, we're always willing to do that kind of stuff. So Mike, don't want to speak for you, but I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I'm absolutely glad, and we're doing some large-scale learning ecosystem design for the government and some other organizations, and building your prototype or your pilot is just one piece. The problem articulation tool we put out there is a 100-point method that you can use to define your problem space, independent of technology, and that gives you a good lay of the land. If you need help thinking through how to approach the learning ecosystem, build the business case, do the technology implementation, those are things Bill and I love to talk about.
Outstanding. Well, thank you for everybody. We had 250 participants as it turned out, and I appreciate every single one of you for listening in, and especially those that asked questions. If we didn't get to your question, please email us. Andrew will be following up. All the information we talked about here will be sent out to you guys as our gratitude for participating today. So, Andrew?
Thank you very much, Bill and Mike, for sharing all this information with us. It was great. As Bill mentioned, you'll get an email within the next hour or two with links to those two offerings from Bill and Mike. And again, do contact them with any questions. I'm seeing a few more questions coming up saying that you'd like some more sessions or more information. Again, just reach out to Bill or Mike with the information that's on the screen now. Thanks a lot, and join us next time. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.